The Season 11 item rework has changed League of Legends drastically. Before any of these changes even hit the live servers, we all knew that the game would never be the same. Whether that would be a good thing or a bad thing in the end, well, that part's a lot trickier to comprehend, and I guess it depends on who you ask. Champions such as Jhin, Olaf, and Seraphine clearly have benefited from the changes. Each one of these champions have been introduced to one or two items in their core build that have allowed them to shine. Gale Force and Collector for Jhin, Gore Drinker for Olaf, and the Moonstaff combination for Seraphine. These specific items have paved the way for these champions on their rise to the top. But it feels kinda black and white, because you could equally say that the item rework was a huge failure if you're a Ryze main. Archangels is really weak this season, and with no Rod of Ages, he is forced to go a super squishy build of Ludens into Archangels. This build has no health whatsoever, and the Seraph's Embrace active shield doesn't exist anymore, so when one champion flourishes like Seraphine has, it kinda feels like another champion has to fall. These core gameplay changes have caused plenty of different frustrating consequences. Buying Grievous Wounds is not an option anymore, but rather a requirement in most builds. Healing and shielding have peaked at an all-time high, but only assassins have a proper anti-shielding item. There have been some weird but also fun off-meta picks like solo lane Ivern that have seen some play, but it's not really for a good reason. While we love champion diversity and unique strategies, the main reason that Ivern solo lane can work is thanks to how busted he is with Moonstone. Where should this game draw the line between innovative, unique, and cool strategies that we've never seen before, or the strategies only existing because of how abusive they can be? These are some really tough questions, but taking it case by case, we can understand more about this new season and its impact on the game, and there is no better place to start than by talking about this champion. This video is brought to you by Manscaped. This Valentine's Day, there is no better place to get your man zone back at peak performance than with Manscaped. The biggest fear I've always had was the damage that can happen while manscaping, because nicks and cuts are a very real concern. But while using Manscaped, I've had nothing but a great experience. Manscaped sent me their Perfect Package 3.0 with new refined cologne to celebrate Valentine's Day. This is the best all-in-one grooming kit I've ever seen. You seriously do not need anything else. The key is the Lawnmower 3.0. It's waterproof, it's cordless, and even comes with an LED light. Personally, my shower is a little dark and hard to see sometimes, but the Lawnmower made it really easy to get the job done right. The refined cologne has a subtle yet enticing scent that will make you feel more confident in yourself and definitely make your partner a little more appreciative of your hygiene. This is the perfect package for your package, so head over to manscaped.com right now and enter my promo code EXIL20 to get 20% off and free shipping. There's a popular meme in the League of Legends community called 200 Years, and for those unaware, this all started about a year ago. A tweet was made by a rioter when talking about the Wukong rework that instantly became picked on due to how strange and sort of arrogant it sounded. In essence, he disagreed with a high-elo Wukong main who was testing the new rework, and when giving feedback, he told him that he would rather take the 200+ years of collective game design experience. This response is really poor because clearly you could take 1 million people and have them work for one day and say that we have a million days of collective experience, even though you just now have a million noobs. But debating his point about Wukong wasn't where the player base took this meme. Instead, they looked at the most broken champion at the time and said only 200 years of experience could have created the monstrosity of a champion known as Aphelios. The comment would backfire as we would use it as ammo to point out Riot's biggest mistakes. Only 200 years could create this client, only 200 years could balance this game, and 200 years of game design obviously helped them have the experience to create the game-breaking invisible Nunu bug. A YouTube user named Metakino probably put it best when he would comment on a Vanderil video, who if you're not already subscribed to, you definitely should because Vanderil's videos are really awesome. He almost exclusively makes videos about bugs and game-breaking issues in League of Legends, and in one of those videos, Metakino said, "Just the fact that someone can hold an entire channel with daily videos only about League of Legends bugs must prove Riot's remarkable 200 years of experience." Sometime during the period where the meme was still hot and spicy, a specific champion was added into the mix, as a sort of punch to the other side of the 200 years meme. You see, with how incredibly overpowered and overloaded each new champion has become, it seems to have all peaked with Samira. This champion has been given not just a lot of tools, but all of the tools. Is it really any surprise that she has been a balanced nightmare and pretty much permabanned since her release?
Everybody's joined in. It's a magic trick.
That's a champion right there, guys. That's a champion. That's balance.
The community would dub her the peak of game design, not 200 years, but instead 400 years of game design experience. But where does Udyr come into play? How could you be a more outdated champion than Udyr? The joke just kind of writes itself, because Samira gets everything with an AoE wind wall, a dash reset, extending knockups on her passive, and of course the champion was just flat out overtuned. But Udyr is a melee only champion that has 4 auto attack enhancers. That's it. These new champions have more words in their passive than Udyr does in his entire kit. He was a doomed champion, destined to be stuck in power creep death until his eventual rework. In the words of Trick2G, Udyr could never compete with these 200-year champions. He was a dead champion forever. Keyword: was.
Here is Pyosik because he locks in the Udyr.
Oh, we're doing it, all right. And BK and Pyosik is taking care of 2 people by himself. We were talking about the fact that Gen G had found team fights that they wanted. This is an example of absolutely not what they want. And there's the bear smack to the back of the head of the Jarvan.
Look at him go.
And now he's just walking around the base. Look at this. Look at this bear. He's terrifying. Oh, now he's a chicken. Now he's a turtle. It's Franklin. It's all sorts of things.
He eat on him. He doesn't have flash. You wanna taste a bit of my Udyr here? Wait, what are you doing, huh? You wanna get... Oh, yeah! You wanna damage me, Giant Raven? You don't do damage. You don't do any damage. But I am burning you. And that, guys, is why I ban Udyr.
Played the game. Iwandi goes down as well. Another dash available for LWX. He's taking a good amount of damage. Heal comes on through as he's chased down by the Bearman. Tarzan trying to close the gap. Can't quite finish off these kills. Crisp walking away with his life here. Tarzan in the 2v1. Can he finish it off? The answer is yes. The Bearman is here.
Blabber's got the dead man's plate with the turbo Kim tank. The boy runs fast. Flash, bear, slap, baby. Blabber's got him, and Alfari is gone. Select the power of the roam with these 2, but Santorin is there, the deer is here, and Perks is running away. Team Liquid turn it back around.
Got flash.
Santorin's in hot pursuit. A slap upside the head for a double kill, and Udyr is running wild on Summoner's Rift in Season 11.
Surprisingly, Udyr has gone through a complete resurgence in Season 11. He's being picked in competitive play all the time, and that's a huge deal. To even understand just how unique this season has been, we have to look back at his previous seasons. Let's put this all into perspective. In all of Season 5, Udyr was picked 10 times and banned 3 times. He won 5 and lost 5 of those games. In 2016, for Season 6, he dropped down to only 8 picks, and the only player to win on Udyr that season was Xmithy, who did win all 3 games. But the interesting part about this season is that he dominated solo queue. Season 6 Udyr was a strong champion. He would build the AP jungle item and max his Phoenix Dance, which gave him a lot of AoE and burst. His ban rate chart for early 2016 sums up everything there is to say about Udyr back then. Look at that spike, he really was a top tier pick. Even with multiple NALCS junglers really giving him a try in solo queue and competitive play, Xmithy won his 3 games of Udyr and never locked it in again, only 8 picks that whole season. Those games would be the last time we would see him for quite a while, because in 2017 Udyr was neither picked or banned a single time. In Season 8, he was picked twice and banned twice, but he didn't win one game. The only time he was played in a major region was by Joko against a Sejuani matchup, but he didn't win. In 2019, he would only see one pick in a minor league, the LFL Spring Split, which is the French league acting as a sort of farm team for the LEC in Europe, but he didn't win that game either. Finally, for 2020, how many times was he picked? Well, sadly, just one time. This time it was in the Romanian Esports League, which is again a smaller competitive scene that is known for its team names being quite meme-worthy. For example, the team that actually did pick Udyr was known as Team LS, the Last Shadows, and also there was a team in the REL that called themselves 200 Years. I gotta love when the script just writes itself. Anyway, Team LS did not win that game on Udyr, which means that from March of 2016 all the way till January of 2021, Udyr was picked a pathetic 4 times and didn't even win. But this January, in 2021, what do his pro play stats look like? Well, they look like this. Pro play for 2021 has only been going on for a few weeks now, and already he has 93 bans and 133 picks, with an overall presence near 30%. These numbers are remarkable. Udyr's champion history has seen way less than 133 total picks, but in just about 2 to 3 weeks, that's how many times he's seen play. Nobody could have predicted this because Udyr was the embodiment of League's 200 years problem. Champion after champion, Riot would raise the bar on how broken they were willing to make them. Pretty soon, the next champion is not even going to be allowed to lose, like that's going to be their passive. This champion makes your team's Nexus invulnerable. So how in the world did this happen? I've covered Udyr and other champions like him a bit more extensively before when I spoke about the attack speed, hard farming Pharaoh Flare junglers. For most of Udyr's history as a champion, he's fit into a similar gameplay category as champions like Master Yi or AD Shyvana. He would build items like the Pharaoh Flare, Blood Razor, Devour, even things such as Rageblade or Bork, Ravenous Hydra, Wit's End, all that good stuff. It was a heavy damage playstyle designed to split push with incredible attack speed, and he was impossible to 1v1. But even with that squishy build, his sustain and movement speed did make it easy for him to solo out one target, but that was just about the extent of what he did well. You could play Udyr in the top lane if you wanted to because you were a pretty strong laner and a duelist, but you didn't scale very well into the late game aside from this idea of wasting enemies' time. The entire late game strategy was all about split pushing and distracting the enemy while your team can either take towers, take Baron, or some other objective. The typical 5v5 team fighting would not work out super well because his damage would either fall off if you built tanky, or he was too squishy to kill anybody, and most importantly, you would be kited. With so much CC and mobility, with every new champion having 15 abilities to get an Udyr off of them, the only option was to play like Trick2G and D Gates. Being a nuisance was your best hope to win games. He was given 2 big patches that tried to help him out. The first came on 7.8 where he received a mini rework, mostly changing his Tiger stance and his Turtle stance. For a time, this did help out his Tiger stance on hit heavy damage build, but again, he was just so squishy that he really couldn't contribute to the late game teamfights. Roughly 2 years later, on 9.13, another mini rework now gave him something to look forward to. After level 16, he can give his abilities a 6th rank, which helps him scale a little better and be more of a late game threat, but it was still such a small change that did not bring him into prominence. Finally, he received one more important patch a couple of months ago on 10.19 that buffed the Phoenix stance AP ratio and base damage. This made any AP that you can fit into your build, even a small amount, a little bit more appealing for him, and the Phoenix stance max is much stronger. Since he was such a bad champion for a while, it's easy to forget that he's been receiving nothing but buffs for the last several years. Eventually, after enough buffs, it's going to catch up to him and he will be strong. This season, with these items, have almost completely and literally fixed all of Udyr's flaws as a champion. The biggest issue, where he can be kited and he can't reach his targets since he is melee only, isn't really an issue anymore. The dilemma of being caught between building full tank and his damage falling off, or by building on hit glass cannon and he's way too squishy to DPS late game. Or even his lack of a dash and any range whatsoever meant that usually a mage like Syndra, a support like Leona, and a top laner like Camille could easily just keep space from him. Now, Udyr does not really struggle with any of these flaws, and it's not for one specific reason, but rather a few. First off, Turbo Chem Tank, Force of Nature, Dead Man's Plate, and Lichbane. These are his 4 core items, and they are insanely efficient for him. Let's start with the Mythic. Chem Tank is a Sunfire Cape mixed with the old Righteous Glory active, except the active is now even better. With one item, he is tanky, he increases his AoE clear speed with the burn, he has the perfect active that lets him run down his targets much quicker, and once you get it, it even slows them, and this is his kind of replacement for a dash. The fact that he doesn't have any true mobility is made up for with this item. His next 2 tank items that he's typically building, which is Deadman's and Force of Nature, share a common theme. These are the movement speed based tank items, with Deadman's giving 5% and Force of Nature giving another 5%. Both of them also come with a passive that further increases movement speed, and similar to Chem Tank, Deadman's actually slows the target. For the final core item, Lichbane gives an absurd 10% movement speed and synergizes extremely well with the fact that the Phoenix Stance Max is now the meta. Let's also not forget the fact that with Udyr building AP and maxing Phoenix Stance, and many of the popular support and mid lane champions being fully invested into the Staff of Flowing Water meta, it means that they give him AP and more movement speed. For his rune choices, it is no longer a press the attack, conqueror, or aftershock type beat. Instead, it is literally full movement speed. Phase Rush into Nimbus Cloak, into Celerity, into Water Walking. 4 of his sorcery runes, all based on going even faster. Because your items give a percentage increase to the movement speed, even when you play a 200 years champion with mobility and stealth, there is no escaping Udyr. Lastly, for the abilities, as we said, Phoenix Stance Max is now the new meta for a couple of reasons, and we've sort of covered them. Not only has it been buffed several times, but when Lichbane is a part of his core build, it's just really efficient to get it, plus again, Staff of Flowing Water. The fantastic base damage as well as some great burst not only helps him clear the jungle with its AoE, but it's pretty much his big upfront damage once he gets in the fight. The actual playstyle of how you're playing the skirmishes and the fights with Udyr is a little different this season, because in a team fight you are now just the most annoying champion to deal with. Your job is to run around and perma-stun people like always, but instead this time you can actually wait out your cooldowns and kite around with your phase rush proc. Instead of staying permanently in the backline and relying on an aftershock proc or praying that you can get your full stacks of Conqueror or a PTA proc, now you can kite around with your phase rush, wait for your bear stance to come up back on the target and stun them again. Eventually, you're going to die to this champion, and he will probably be able to stand in a 1v5 and make it out alive due to the phase rush. Chasing him is also impossible because he's just way faster than is even reasonable. The champion is thriving as a sum of all these parts rather than one specific thing that you can pinpoint. He resides as a top tier threat in competitive play and solo queue. Depending on who you ask, he might even be the single strongest champion in the game, and that is coming after his first round of nerfs as well.
And Blabbers seems pretty caught. Never mind. I guess I don't know what I'm talking about. He's what am I saying? Whenever I think that Udyr is caught, the answer is just kidding. They gave over Udyr. Like, that champ is never gonna die. It's just the most fucking brain dead, unkillable champion in the whole League of Legends video game. Just ignore me when I think that Udyr is dead.
On patch 11.3, the base damage on Phoenix Stance was lowered at higher ranks, which became the first time that Udyr was nerfed in just about 5 years. The best performing Udyrs in competitive play so far have been Santorin and Pyosik. Collectively, they've played 7 games and haven't lost one yet. One particular game from Santorin really showed the power of Udyr as he finished with 6 kills, no deaths, and 11 assists, and he even did more damage than his ADC playing Samira. So the meme champion was more useful and more impactful than the 400 years champion. What a time to be alive. A question that might have popped into your head by now is, how is this any different than just using Predator? Because ever since Runes Reforged came out 3 years ago, there's a keystone that does exactly what Udyr is doing right now. You activate Predator on your boots and run at enemies really fast and deal bonus damage. It sounds like this would have been perfect for Udyr all along, and for a while it did bring another old and dead champion out of the grave. Skarner was a champion that nobody had played for several years, but because of a rune page optimization where he started taking Predator, he became a top tier pick in pro play. This rune gave Skarner some much needed agency, which is to say that he could have more impact on the game and help determine the outcome. Skarner's kit suffers from many of the same problems that Udyr's does. He is pretty much full melee with no true dashes or gap closers, and his damage falls off late game if you build full tank. The reason that Skarner rose to the top of pro play with Predator while Udyr did not is because the domination tree is far less efficient for him, and Skarner's ultimate is still a very strong ability if you're able to get in range. The funny part to all this is now Skarner has become the new Udyr in some ways and is receiving a nerf on the next patch. Players remembered that Skarner was so good with Predator, and using the exact same strategy and exact same build as Udyr is basically the best jungler in the game. The parallels between the old Aatrox and now Udyr is just another example of how in life history will always repeat itself. If you remember what happened with Aatrox back in 2018, that champion was a completely dead and memed on champion for about 4 or 5 years. He was useless, he wasn't very good, he had tons of problems, and then a mini rework and a couple of game updates around him, specifically the introduction of the new rune called Conqueror, all of a sudden made him a top pick in pro play and in solo queue. Tons of people were playing him, spamming him, and winning games. He was finally a good champion, and then like a few weeks later he was reworked. Riot was caught in a tough position because they had this rework ready to go for Aatrox that they had spent months and months or maybe even a full year on, but then the champion they were reworking finally, out of nowhere, became good. Isn't it pretty funny that this champion, who has been dead for several years, finally becomes good right after he wins the community poll to be reworked? It looks like Riot's going to be left in another tough position for the Udyr rework, since he's confirmed to get one in 2021, yet after all this time, now he's actually good. I guess the point here is that Udyr is not a perfectly designed champion, and we all know that. In a lot of ways, his kit is still outdated, and without question, that base model is just, I mean, it looks like this. I mean, is there really anything that I have to say? He still does stat check you, he runs at you, and is annoying to deal with, but here's the reason that I don't have as much of a problem with it as you might think. The reason that Udyr is strong is because these items aren't necessarily impossible to balance or get right. In fact, they're kind of just working as intended. Turbo Chem Tank is an item that is meant to help bruisers and tanks initiate fights and engage. Just like Gale Force is an item that has helped to give immobile ADCs a dash. These items were designed for champions like Udyr and Skarner, and those two are using it well. The Season 11 item rework is still so far from perfect, but numbers aside, it's interesting to see that Udyr and Skarner, champions who needed items like this, are able to make use of it and be good champions. It's not as if champions like Fiora, Aurelia, or even Sion are building this item. They are building the items like Gore Drinker or Sunfire Cape that are good for them. Udyr seems to be making good use of items that are good for him, and that's pretty cool. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on Udyr this season and what's happened to him. If you've enjoyed this video and watched it to the end, thank you so much, I really appreciate it. You watching these videos and finding them entertaining is the reason that I make them, and it would mean a lot to me if you would give it a like and leave a comment, because it always helps out with that darn YouTube algorithm. If you want to support the content that I produce, you can check out my Patreon. Without Patreon, videos like these would be a lot harder to make, and it would take me a lot longer because I still have to, kind of find a way to support myself. So thank you all so much for supporting the channel through Patreon. It's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a nice day. Thanks for watching.